Hello, this is Joe from Nerd in Korea. We are doing a Vraska the Silencer budget deck tech today, and I'm calling this deck Zip It. Okay, so Vraska is Golgari, so she's black-green as her color identity. She has a 1 black-green, 3/3 with Death Touch. Her ability is, whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, you may pay 1. If you do, return that to the battlefield under your control. It's a treasure token with tap it to sacrifice and add 1 mana of any color. Basically treasure, yeah. And it loses all other card types. That's the really important part right there. If you're choosing which creatures to get a hold of, if you can just destroy a creature and maybe steal it, having something that has double strike lifelink and is a 6/7 or something, no point. Right? That doesn't do anything. You don't get to use it as a creature, it becomes a treasure. So all of those things, big attack power, any kind of combat ability, anything like that, it's just going to end up being treasure. What you do want to look for is ETBs, death triggers, and static abilities. Things that give effects like anthems that will give bonuses to a whole bunch of your creatures. Those it still has the abilities, but it won't, you can't attack with it during combat or anything. Anyhoo. Okay, so her ability to steal creatures as they are going to the graveyard and make them into treasures is a very powerful one, that's true. What is more useful, even this is a very odd one, this is a very strange mechanic. People have probably seen things like Ariat the Beguiler, where you can steal a creature. That's something they expect to see. What they don't expect is you to convert it into another card type and steal it. So even with Ariat, they can kill it and it goes to the graveyard, and maybe they can get it back from the graveyard. So there's a lot of creature removal or combat can do it. And then with this, you need something that can specifically destroy artifacts. So you're going to use your targeted removal just to send your own creature to the graveyard. It becomes a lot more difficult of a kind of pros and cons list, I guess. Also, if you have something that counters abilities, they could counter her ability. It's possible. That only costs you 1 mana to activate it. And it's kind of if you don't get it, not the end of the world. Not a big deal, really, right? If they're countering an ability, it probably costs them a fair amount of mana and or a card. So it's something that is costing them a lot more than it's going to cost you. The deck price here presently is $39.84. So my deck objective was to take maximum advantage of opponent's creatures dying. Right? This is all about killing creatures so you can steal them and get extra value out of that. So adding death triggers and things like that. Your opponent's going to take a bunch of extra damage and all that fun stuff. It is determined using the TCG player market price. I've been informed by a commenter that the shipping cost is actually quite high on TCG player, and that it ends up being cheaper on Card Kingdom, even though it lists the price of the deck actually being higher. So yeah, that's unfortunate. So if you want to order this, maybe look at the Card Kingdom one instead. Actually, I want to contact TCG and see if they'll if they've got something to cut down the shipping price, because that's especially I found out when I was 10. I've done probably 100 videos using TCG market value. So at this point, I'm maybe it's a sunken cost fallacy, but do I switch or do I just stick with it? If I switch now, it's going to look like everything suddenly got way, 50% more expensive or something. So yeah, this is kind of a reference point. This number is a reference point, not a actual what you're going to pay kind of thing. And then you can check the deck on moxfield.com. Even at your game store, I think your local game store, you could probably get most of the pieces for this and fill in whatever you can't find. Part 1, Vraska the Silencer. Alright, so this is about the commander and kind of how the commander works in the deck. Alright, so once again, Prioritize stealing creatures with ETBs, death triggers, and static abilities. Things like anthems. Anthems can be a little tricky because sometimes they are going to be specifically, say, like +1/+1 to all cats or something, right? So you might not have cats. This deck does have changelings, though. Remember, they can become treasures, not creatures anymore. That is a really important thing to keep in mind, that they are going to be treasures, not creatures. So that is, yeah, a very big difference there. High synergy cards. Alright, so Gravelighter. This is a card with a common effect in this deck, forcing your opponents to sacrifice. So there's a lot of forcing your opponents to sacrifice things in this deck. A lot of them also require you sacrifice things too, and we got things to kind of mitigate that or even take advantage of that. So when it enters the battlefield, draw a card if a creature died this turn. Otherwise, each player sacrifices a creature. So basically, if you're going to force people to sacrifice things, and you want to use this as another sacrifice, get them to sacrifice and then play this, and if it's the start of the turn, nothing's died yet, play this and draw a card. So it kind of gives you the option of what it does, most of the time anyway. Finn the Fangbearer. So I think there's a lot of people that might groan at this one, but still. Again, he's 1 green for a 1/3 with Death Touch. Whenever a creature with Death Touch deals damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. So what we really want to do with this is force people to block, right? If you're stealing their creatures, or stealing creatures and like making a bunch of treasure tokens out of it, they might say, oh, I'll just keep it then. I don't want to do that. What you really want to do, though, is you want to, like, force them to block, right? If they don't want to start piling up a bunch of poison counters, remember, 10 they lose. So at 2 per hit, that's 5 creatures with a Death Touch that will lead them to just lose the game outright. They can get hit 5 times, and that's it. So that really adds a lot of pressure for them to block and lose creatures so that you can steal them. Changeling Outcast. So I mentioned this, or not exactly this, but so this card is useful for 2 reasons. Again, it's 1/1 for 1 black only, and it can't block and can't be blocked. So it's unblockable is the first advantage, right? If you give it Death Touch, and there's many ways to do that in this deck, you're going to be able to start racking up those poison counters even if they don't want them. And changelings will benefit from any anthem effect a stolen creature may provide. I believe I have 2 changelings in this. Now I'm second guessing. Did I get the second one in? Anyway, yeah. It's but they can benefit from a lot more things than other creatures can, so yeah. It could be useful in some games. Sereth the Viper's Fang. So gives all tap creatures, like attacking creatures, Death Touch, protects them the rest of the time, right? If they're untapped, they have Hexproof, which is great. If they're tapped, they have Death Touch. So this is all your creatures, whenever they tap to attack, just Death Touch automatically. I don't think there's any Vigilance creatures in this deck, but if there was a Vigilance creature, remember, they would not be able to do that, right? They would not tap when they attack, so they do not gain Death Touch. Also, a nice little bonus is you can pay 1 and tap Sereth to untap another creature or land. So that could be very useful. Anyway, Death Reap Ritual. Okay, I love this card. I think people really underestimate this card. It's worth less than $1 still. I've had this in my Chatterfang deck for years now. Anyway, for a 2 Golgari, again, black-green. At the beginning of each end step, again, each end step, not your end step, each. So in a commander game, that's 4 times per turn, right? Or per round, not per turn. So at the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, you may draw a card. So this is probably going to draw a good, like, 3 or 4 cards per turn, right? Or I said it again, per round. I always have to tell myself, turn around, Bright Eyes, but anyway, yeah. Okay. Yeah, even in a regular game, this will do a lot of work, but I think in this deck, like, you're gonna have so many ways, like Royal Assassin, that can just up and kill something out of nowhere. You're gonna be able to guarantee that card draw pretty regularly. Finally, Calling Ritual. Oh my gosh. So this card, I think, was made, like, or the commander was made for this card. I've had this card for quite a while. I think it's just amazing. Anyway, so for 2 green-black, this is a very selective board wipe. Destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. Add black or green for each permanent destroyed this way. So a lot of times people look at this and go, oh, well, it's going to destroy tokens and everything under 2, but that usually 2 and 3 mana, a lot of creatures are going to be 3 or higher, you know? You don't actually need to destroy all of those creatures. You're going to have all kinds of sack effects for that in this deck. What you really want to use this as is to, like, get away of their sack fodder, or get rid of their sack fodder, and then, yeah, give yourself a whole bunch of mana. This is a huge mana boost, so yeah. And then that mana you can use to pay for the creatures that you destroyed. Part 2, the plan. So what are the deck objectives here? Alright, we got ramp, death to life drain, sack it all, and win cons. Alright. So ramp, first up we got wood elves. This is very good in this deck because we do have a fair amount of recursion, so you're going to be able to get it back to your hand, play it again, and then fetch another forest. Remember, every time it enters the battlefield, you get to get a basic forest, or it doesn't even say basic, it's just a forest out of your deck, put it into the battlefield. And we got 2 mana Dorks that have Death Touch. So there's Deathbloom Gardener that has add 1 mana of any color. And Leyline Prowler is the other one that also has Death Touch and add 1 mana of any color. Bounty Board, so again, add 1 mana of any color, but what's more interesting in this deck is that you can pay 1 tap it to put a bounty counter on target creature, activate only as a sorcery, and so whenever a creature with a bounty counter on it dies, each of its controller's opponents draws a card and gains 2 life. So you are kind of helping everyone except for that one person at the table. That can be very good. As long as you're not like the arch enemy at the table. If it's someone else, great. Keep your head down and do this and like curry some favor. It's a really nice political tool that I think, you know, game mechanics wise isn't the most impressive, but I think in actual play will do a lot. Black Market. So this is getting expensive for 5, right? 3 black. Whenever a creature dies, put a charge counter on Black Market. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add black for each charge counter on Black Market. So I wasn't able to fit in. I do have a lot of Proliferate in this deck as well. So you're going to be able to... This is counters, right? So you're going to be able to keep... Every time you proliferate, put another charge counter on here, is making your proliferate into mana generation. So there's a lot of things where you have like 1 mana to cast a spell that has proliferate, and then you're going to be able to get 1 extra mana at the next pre-combat main phase. That really stacks up quickly, especially Black Ramp is nice to have, and the death trigger on it is like just crazy in this deck. Binding the Old Gods. Alright, so this is a saga. So when it destroy target non-land permanent an opponent controls, first up, just removal. You can use it on a creature if you want to steal it, or you can use it on any problem on the board, right? Just super useful, even always useful. This is on my list of removal cards, and this is definitely great for that. The next one is search your library for a forest card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. Again, forest, right? Forest, not basic land forest, just forest. I believe there are 2 dual lands that have the forest type in this deck, so yeah. And finally, creatures you control gain Death Touch until end of turn. The Death Touch synergy in this, there's so much. It's gonna like, even just having Death Touch when you can like steal creatures that are going to the graveyard is amazing, but yeah. I really amped up the synergy on that. Death to Life Drain. Okay, so Marionette Apprentice. So whenever another creature or artifact you control is put into a graveyard. Again, you control is put into a graveyard. Okay, so your treasure tokens, you control them. You do not own that card though. That's okay, you control it. And it's an artifact that will go into a graveyard. So every time you use one of your artifact or your treasure tokens, or they're not tokens, your treasures that you've made, that's going to trigger this, and all your opponents take 1 damage each time, which is going to add up very, very quickly. Sir Conrad the Grim. So whenever another creature dies or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. So even if you're using one of your recursion effects and a creature comes out of your graveyard back to your hand or to the battlefield, that's going to do 1 damage to all your opponents as well. Also, for 1 black, each player mills a card. That may not sound super impressive, but what it does is it's great if they're using like Miracle or something like that, or they have a scry heavy deck where they're really setting up their next turn. They're going to have whatever they want on top of their deck, and you're just going to keep like throwing it into the graveyard. So if you see them scrying a bunch, this is what you do, right? Next up, Massacre Worm. This used to be so expensive, and now it's like dirt cheap. Why is it dirt cheap now? Because I have it. That's why, yeah. So when again, it is 6, so it's 3 black for a 6/5. But when Massacre Worm enters the battlefield, creatures your opponents control get -2/-2 until end of turn. Again, this is going to like, this is almost like a selective board wipe, right? This is almost like another Culling Ritual type of thing. I guess Culling Ritual works on anything, not just creatures, but anyway, yeah. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. So whenever their creature dies, or is supposed to go to the graveyard, that's 2 life gone, right? That adds up very, very quickly. Especially if they've got like a token deck or something and you drop this guy, game over, right? Poison Tipped Archer. He has Reach and Death Touch, which is a great combination. And whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. Whenever another creature dies. It doesn't matter who controls the creature, not your creature, any creature. If any creature dies on the battlefield except for him, your opponents are losing life. Again, he does have a forecasting cost, so like Culling Ritual will not kill him. It will take out a whole bunch of other things. If he's on the battlefield, when you cast Culling Ritual or you have Massacre Worm out, then yeah. That's 1 extra damage to Massacre Worm's already 2 per. And it's going to hit everyone though, right? Massacre Worm, they lose 2 life for each of their creatures. With the Poison Tip Archer, they lose 1 life for every single creature. Doesn't matter whose creature it is. Finally, Bastion of Remembrance. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Again, you do have a lot of sack effects that are going to like hit your own things as well. You're going to get some value out of that, basically. And it also lets you take more advantage of that kind of Death Touch thing, where you're just throwing a bunch of things at your opponents to try and get them to block, so you can steal their creatures and make the treasure, right? You're going to be able to steal a lot of things on creatures that are going to, like, give you win cons and all kinds of things, right? So this is really fundamental to this deck. This is really how she plays. Sack it all. Gravelighter, we already talked about. Plaguecrafter. So when Plaguecrafter enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Each player who can't discards a card. So you're going to force, each player. So that does, once again, that includes you. That does, but you can get a lot more value. We've got lots of ways to make tokens and things like that. So you could just like destroy a token and be like, yeah, whatever. Everyone else is going to be like losing stuff, especially if you play first like Culling Ritual and then play him, right? Culling Ritual gets rid of all of the things that they wouldn't mind sacking, and it's going to leave all the things that it's going to hurt to sacrifice, basically. Soul Shatter. So each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the highest converted mana cost among creatures and planeswalkers they control. A lot of times that might be, it's going to be like their key piece, or even possibly in some decks they're like commander, right? They're going to be having to sacrifice. And when they sacrifice it, I guess the commander can go to the command zone, so you might not be able to steal that, but anything that goes to a graveyard, you can snap that up very easily. Doomsday Confluence. This is mostly in the deck for one specific reason. This is a follow-up to Culling Ritual, right? So choose X, you may choose the same mode more than once. Again, it's XX black. So basically for every 2 extra you pay, you get another effect, or you can double an effect, or even triple it, right? You do the effect again. Each player sacrifices a non-artifact creature. Create a 3/3 black Darlek artifact creature token with menace, or each opponent discards a card. In different situations, all of these are going to be very good, right? Discard is so mean. It really does like take away, obviously it takes away their options, but like even you've got like a plan in your head of what you're going to do, and then someone forces you to discard, and it's just like kind of discombobulates you. Finally, Vona's Hunger. This is, I think, the best one. So it has Ascend, so if you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. Huge and easy to do in Commander, right? 10 permanents is not many, really? Each opponent sacrifices a creature if you have the City's Blessing, which is easy to do. Instead, each opponent sacrifices half the creatures that he or she controls rounded up. So you cast this, even if it's like probably turn 4. You've probably already got 10 permanents out by turn 4. That does include lands, keep in mind. So yeah, you cast this and it's just like, it is an instant as well, so you can do it on their turn. And yeah, they're just like losing most of or 50% of their creatures. It's going to be a huge hit to their board, and it lets you just like snap up a bunch of things you want, right? You should keep an eye out for like what are they likely to sacrifice that you want to steal. You kind of need to make a mental list of that. Win cons. Alright, so win con number 1, Champion of Lamholt. Anytime I have green, I have Champion of Lamholt. My first win con is always combat. Most of the time, most games are decided on combat. Every deck needs at least one combat win con. Okay? So, creatures with power less than Champion of Lamholt's power can't block creatures you control. So again, that means 0. When Champion of Lamholt comes into the battlefield, anything with 0 power, like some walls do, will not be able to block any of your creatures. Which again, you're going to get through that like poison damage and things like that. It's going to really add up fast. And whenever another non-token or another creature, I'm adding things again. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of Lamholt. Sylvan Offering is what this is great for. X and a green. So whatever you want, however many mana you want. Choose an opponent. You and that player each create XX green treefolk creature tokens. And choose an opponent. You and that player each create XX green elf warrior tokens. So even if you pay 6, right? 5 and a green, you're going to give 5 treefolk tokens to someone, and you get 5 treefolk tokens, and then you can give 5 elf tokens to someone, and you get 5 elf tokens. And that's already an 11/11 Champion of Lamholt. That's nuts, right? For 6 mana, you make all of your creatures unblockable by anything with 10 attack power and under. Oof. And, okay, win con number 2, Massacre Worm. I'm going to have my Dr. Pepper here. Not a sponsor. I forgot to say not a sponsor in the first part. Fish Sticks is going to get me for that, I know it. Anyway, that's a commenter, Fish Sticks. But yeah, anyway. Okay. Massacre Worm, we already talked about. So, playing Massacre Worm and then casting Bonus Hunger, right? Massacre Worm is going to kill a whole bunch of things. But yeah, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. So first you play that, and then they have to sacrifice all their little guys. And then you play Bonus Hunger, and they have to sacrifice probably a whole lot more. And they're going to be losing life every time they do that. Especially if you have, like I said, Poison Tip Archer. You do not need him for this win con, but it helps a lot. And if you do that, I'm assuming that they've taken any damage at all, probably game over right there, right? Unless they have like no creatures. I guess that's the one thing, but yeah. Alright, so win con number 3, Mirkwood Bats. Whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. Sylvan Offering. So again, you're making double tokens for yourself of the X cost. And then you cast Culling Ritual, right? So when they come in, they do damage because you're making them. And you cast Culling Ritual, and you blow up everybody's tokens. This is also great with something like Poison Tip Archer, because they're going to take damage for every single one that, again, if you do that 5, paying 6 altogether, whether you do 5, and 10 for you, you're destroying at least 20 things. That's 20 damage to each opponent. That's crazy. If you have, again, Poison Tip Archer out, and you're going to be creating 20 mana for yourself. In any combination of black or green. Whew. Win con number 4. This is our poison, right? Poison is a major part of this, and yeah, getting those poison casters down and can start proliferating, that turns the heat up and makes that so they have to keep blocking. They have to keep like making sure that they don't get any more of them, because even once they get to like 4, you can proliferate probably to the win con. Anyhoo, Finn, again, yeah, anything with Death Touch is going to automatically give them 2 poison counters if they take any damage at all from a creature. So even your 1/1s that you're making, if they get through with damage and do 1 damage, that's 2 poison counters. So much worse than 1 damage. And Vraska's Fall, each opponent sacrifices a creature or a planeswalker and gets a poison counter. So you're just dropping poison counters on your opponents and forcing them to sacrifice. Finally, Noxious Assault. Creatures you control get +2/+2 until end of turn. Whenever a creature blocks this turn, its controller gets a poison counter. So it's like, do you want to lose or do you want to lose? The +2/+2 to all your creatures, you're going to be able to take massive advantage of. Part 3, Combos and Tactics. So this is about getting the most value. There's a lot in this. I couldn't even fit everything in. It would be way too long of a video. Recursion. Alright, Rise of the Witch King. Again, each player sacrifices a creature. If you sacrifice a creature this way, you may return another permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Again, not creature, permanent. So you could sacrifice a 1/1 token creature, you don't care, and you put any permanent you want back to the battlefield. Artifact, it doesn't matter, right? Artifact, enchantment, whatever it may be, that thing you need, if they blew up your black market, just throw it back into the battlefield. Just awesome. Skullwinder, I actually really like this one. It does have Death Touch, which is another bonus. In a way, it costs 2 and a green for a 1/3 with Death Touch. And when Skullwinder enters the battlefield, return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Then choose an opponent. That opponent also returns a card from the graveyard to their hand. choose someone to help them out and kind of curry some favor like a political tool, or choose someone who doesn't have much in the graveyard. Either way, you win, right? Unnatural Restoration. Return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand and proliferate. Right, so that's one of our proliferate cards right there. It's any permanent card. I kind of wish it was just any card, because it would be nice to get Culling Ritual back, but yeah, whatever. Evolution Charm. So its second mode is return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. You can also use it to get a land, or target creature gains flying until end of turn. Finally, Oversold Cemetery. This is the big one for this deck. So at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 5 or more creatures cards in your graveyard, you may return a target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So this is just automatically going to like start throwing things back into your hand. If you have Sir Conrad on the battlefield, every time you do that, it's just automatic 1 damage, right? And just getting your choice when you're going to be sacrificing creatures a lot. That's the way it'll give you an easy way to get recursion, right? If you have 4 creatures in your graveyard, Oversold Cemetery out, just kill something of your own, kill your own creature, and get that creature you really want back to your hands so you can play it again. More cards. So this is a card draw. Morbid Opportunist and Death Ritual. Both of these will draw a card once per turn, and yeah, as long as every turn. So again, 4 per round. For every player's turn, you get to draw a card if a creature dies. So adds up very quickly. And finally, I can't read it. Harvester of Ghouls. I thought it was TR. I was like, I know it's not TR. Travester of Ghouls. That would be funny. But anyway. So it is 6 mana, but it's a death touch, 1 advantage, and whenever another non-token creature dies, you may draw a card. Okay, you may. Not you have to. That can draw you out pretty quick. Having that may on a card draw, automatic card draw, is very good, because otherwise you might just like lose the game by drawing through your library. Cost reduction. Okay, so Defiler of Flesh. Any permanent that has black in its casting cost, you pay 2 life instead. And whenever you cast a black permanent spell, you don't have to use the mana reduction ability. Just anytime you cast a black permanent spell. Again, permanent, not creature, right? Target creature you control gets +1/+1, which is okay, and gains Menace until end of turn. Menace is the much better part of that, right? Especially if you're going for the Poison Wind con, that will be very, very useful. Rona's Monument. Green creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So we have cost reduction for black permanents, cost life though, and green creatures. Also, whenever you cast a creature spell, again, a creature spell. So if Defiler Flesh and Rona's Monument are out, you cast a black creature spell, that's a black permanent creature, so it's going to get both of these effects. Whenever you cast a creature spell, target creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. Right? It doesn't have to be that creature. You choose whatever creature you want to give it. You can give it the +1/+1 and Menace, and the +2/+2 and Trample. Menace, Trample, +3/+3, just for casting a black creature, which there's plenty of in this deck. Anyway. Honest Rustin. Again, creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Again, this benefits all creature spells, which you're going to be casting and recasting likely quite a bit. And whenever it enters the battlefield, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. He's also going to just like pick up a creature and chuck him back into your hand from your graveyard. Once again, look for triggers like Sir Conrad with that. Don't touch that. This is all about death touch. just in case you're not clear about his name. Attacking creatures you control have death touch. So, Oran, Frostfang, Oran? Yeah, okay. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Card draw. Always, right? Sheriff Viper's Fang, we talked about her already. Yeah, any tapped creatures gain death touch. I believe there are no vigilance creatures in this, so it won't matter for that. Hooded Blightwing. This is a crazy one, okay? So for 2 and a black, it's a 1/4 with death touch, and whenever a creature you control with death touch attacks each opponent, loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Each opponent loses 1 life, right? So if you have 3 opponents, this does 3 damage and you gain 1 life. Every time a creature you control with death touch attacks, you can give all your creatures death touch pretty easily, right? This could be a whole whack. This is almost like WinCon territory sometimes. Oh, sorry. Whenever a creature you control with death touch damages a planeswalker, destroy that planeswalker. So basically, it extends death touch to planeswalkers, which is great versus Super Friends decks. Vraska joins up. So the part we care about here is that when she enters the battlefield, put a death touch counter on each creature you control. All of your creatures become death touch creatures. Once again, Hooded Blightfang is out. Just attack with everything and you might be able to win the game right there. If you've got enough creatures, again, all of your tokens are going to count for that as well. And Binding of the Old Gods, again, it's 3rd step, granting death touch to all your creatures for 1 turn only. Poison counters, because we're not done yet. Finn the Fangbearer, we talked about a couple times already. Phyrexian Swarmlord. I love this card. It finally went up in value. I've had it for ages, sitting around being like, why isn't this worth more? But anyway. 4 green. That's why it's not worth more. Yeah, casting cost, right. It has Infect. This is one of the only cards in the deck that actually has Infect. So anyway, at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 green Phyrexian creature token with Infect for each poison counter your opponents have. You're going to be able to automatically put poison counters and proliferate them quite a bit with this deck. So this is going to be like quite a good number, right? This is going to be a good number of insect creatures with Infect that you can make just every turn. You can keep doing it. Infectious Bite. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Remember, if they have death touch, that is going to kill the creature, and that's a great way to like steal whatever you want. Each opponent gets a poison counter. Automatic poison counter, there you go. Noxious Assault, we talked about already. Again, forcing them to either block and get poison counters or not block and take damage. And Caressa Phyrexia. Target player draws 3 cards, loses 3 life, and gets 3 poison counters. Yoi! Again, you want to use this to like finish off someone, right? Get them to 7 poison counters, play this, right? Take them out. I guess you could use it yourself if you really need card draw, and your opponents aren't playing Infect, then it's probably safe to do it, but in general, don't do it on yourself. Trigger Happy. Again, Emrakul's Evangel. So what you do, you tap to sacrifice him and any number of other non-Eldrazi creatures. That's everything in this deck. Again, you could tap and sacrifice any number of tokens as well. Token creatures do count. Put a 3/2 colors Eldrazi creature token onto the battlefield this way for each creature sacrifice this way. Each creature sacrifice, that does include him, right? So if you sacrifice him and 14 tokens, you make 15 of those. You are going to get all kinds of bonuses, like Poison Tip Archer will do 15 damage to all of your opponents, and then they come back. These things come back into the battlefield, so like Mirkwood Bats would trigger when your tokens die, and when the new ones come in, it would trigger both times. So that, yeah, if you did, that'd be 14 if you did 14 tokens, and then 15 when they come back in. So yeah, that would be pretty crazy. Black Market, we talked about that already. Remember, basically you're getting an extra mana every time a creature dies. Doesn't matter, you're a creature, any creature, right? Whenever a creature dies, is a great thing to see in this deck. And then, yeah, you're just going to be adding a crazy amount of black mana for each time a creature dies in the whole game, and you're just killing everything. Orc Sure Shot. So whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1 until end of turn. And this is, once again, very easy to stack with like Emrakul's Evangel. All of those tokens entering the battlefield are just going to set this off multiple times, and you just do math, right? You're like, okay, I have 15 creatures entering. That's a total of -15. Which creatures can I fit in that I want to steal? That I'm going to take out with Orc Sure Shot. This is another just crazy underrated card. Anyway, Bounty Board, we just talked about that. Having something in this deck that curries some good favor as well, I think is very important. Like, just not have the entire table maybe outraged at you all the time. And again, Champion of Lamholt. Once again, we did talk about this as well, but creatures entering are just going to like keep buffing her up. So yeah. So this has been Vraska the Silencer. Zip it! Alright, thank you, and take it easy.